All right. So as you can kind of see here, hopefully everybody's been able to get into SciBooks, whether you decided to go through the bookstore or you want to buy it directly. I think that the price is about the same. You're looking to this week finish up the Chapter 1 Intro to C++. You'll see here that some of these sections are marked optional. That does not mean I don't think they're worth reading. It's just that I'm not requiring them. So in the Y programming, I would recommend you read the Y programming. I'm not asking you to answer those questions, but it's interesting to look at. And it raises the point of what I was just talking about earlier with Bjarne Strustrup, his slides, which is there's a lot of fields that you might work in where you might write programs even if your job is not programmer. A lot of people, for example, almost anybody now who does scientific research is writing some kind of code, whether it's to properly tabulate their findings or as part of their system. More and more, it's just part of life. And so we're looking to finish this first chapter basically this week. But what I want to reference here is the Hello World assignment. And I'm going to load the Word instructions, but I'm not going to put them on screen. Because what I'm going to do is just go into REPL.IT. I'm going to kind of work through this assignment. So what you'll see if you've read the Hello World assignment is there's kind of, like I said just now, about optional material. There's a lot of backstory that I provided that is not required. However, it's sort of why are we doing this stuff as opposed to how do we do this stuff. And I think there's some value to that. And certainly if you're curious about it, I think it will work well. All right, so I'm not going to go through all the back information about high-level languages, low-level languages. And I'm going to go ahead and get into the assignment itself, but I would ask you to read that. So I'm going to go in, this is just how you do this. So you go to REPL.IT, repl.it, that stands for Read, Evaluate, Print, and Loop, which is just sort of what the system does. You type in information, it reads it, it does something, it responds, and it goes again. Now you can log in or sign up if you want to. You might find a benefit to doing that. I don't do that. I haven't bothered. I just download my work every time when I'm finished in the browser. So you're going to scroll down to C++, you're going to select that. Now if you go down on the list, you might find a couple of other versions of C++, like C++ 11 or C++ 14. This is the one that you want to use. Like many things, there's sort of new versions that come out every so often. They're pretty minor differences, and so it's not going to be something to worry about too much. All right, so I know some of you have already done this, so it'll be a chance to, if you have any questions, just kind of ask me. But I wanted everybody to kind of get a feel for how this looks, especially because the first video I uploaded is fairly low res. So you start off, and if I just run this program, you're going to see it works just fine as is. It just prints hello world, which is great. Okay. Again, why is it hello world? Who knows? What's the first thing I think supposedly that Alexander Graham Bell said over the phone when he invented it was, Watson, come here, I need you. Sometimes these things are just kind of random, so fair enough. So the first thing I want to do, and it's just for convenience, is I'm not going to put that standard, because I'm going to use using namespace standard. Okay? And this just means anything that I would have to put the std : in front of, I don't have to anymore. There's not really a downside to doing this. It's going to save you a lot of typing along. So I'm going to do that here. All right. While I'm at it, I'm going to go up to the top of the file. I'm going to make my comment header. So what does that look like? Right. Of course, you put your name and your date. But the idea is, for any programming class you take here at Fable Tech, there's a standard comment header we always use at the top of the file. I see a lot of files from a lot of people. This makes my life much easier. So I appreciate you doing this. And there are points to be lost if you don't, but just do it and it won't be a problem. Okay, so now I have my file in the way I want it. Now, one thing I kind of mention to people is, what's this int main? All right. Well, when you think about when you run a program, what's happening? Chapter 1 talks about this. Behind the scenes, it takes your file and it compiles it into an actual machine language. So it converts it to the exact language that the processor in your computer speaks. And different things have different processors. You know, phones, game consoles, turbine engines, computers, all different processors. And so every version of machine language is different. But C++ is pretty much the same across all platforms. So the benefit here is I'm writing the program in C++ because I know C++. And then the compiler does the work of making it run on whatever device I'm actually using. So I press the button, it runs the program. And how does it know what to do? Well, it looks for something called main. Right? And you'll see a function or a method. If you think about this, like these are just words for verbs. Like English has nouns and verbs. Something like C++ has functions and it has variables. So I have a function called main, and by definition, it's going to look for this function, and everything inside the curly braces here, it's going to do this code. So let's just try this. Well, what you're going to find is if I have code and it's not inside of main, it does not work. You've absolutely got to put your code in main. And in the same way, if you ever accidentally delete one of your curly braces or put one of your curly braces in the wrong place, you will get many, many errors. It's just sort of the structure of how the language works. All right. So the first thing I'll do, I'll kind of show you here, this \n, that's fine. You can use that. But there's a command called endl for end line or end of line. And it's just a little easier way to say print a new line. Let's look at what happens if I take this out. So see, this is not what I wanted. It's putting it all in one line. And that's because every line of code is just adding stuff to the stream. And the stream is what's being printed out here with this cout stream. So by putting it endl, I'm saying, hey, while you're making the stream, I'd like you to add a new line. Now I can do something like this. And add a bunch of new lines if I wanted to. So there's a section in either chapter 1 or 2. It talks about using white space and kind of explaining like how you format things. And that'll come up. All right. So what I'm seeing right now is if I do cout and I put anything in quotes, it's going to print what I put. It doesn't matter what I put. Anything's fine. And that's because these quotes indicate what's called a string literal. You think about when somebody holds their fingers up and does air quotes. That's kind of what I think about when I say literal. And it kind of turns this kind of brick red color in the Replit compiler. So what it's saying here is this is a string of characters. Like I think about a string of beads, but there's a B with an H, a B with an E, an L, and so forth. And it kind of has this whole string here. And it just memorizes this as a thing that it knows. So if you put that in the code and say, I want to print hello world, that's going to work just fine. But a program that only does the same thing over and over again is not especially useful. And so I'm going to want to make it different each time. Okay? And we're going to ease our way into that. So I'm going to declare a variable. So like I said before, you know, main is an example of a verb. It's not really well phrased to be a verb, but it means run the program. When the program starts, do everything inside of main. So an example of a noun, if we're speaking C++, would be a variable. So I'll say string name. And that's a valid line right there. But now that's a string variable. It's a place in memory that holds a string of characters. But unlike the hello world, it doesn't have anything in it. And so if I try to print it out, it's not going to work properly. So I'm going to set it to a value. And I do that by using an equal sign. So I'll have to say John Doe. And now if I want to use this variable, I can just do it like this and say, it's me too. And you see here, of course, this will print everything the way you expect it. This is to add things to the stream. It gets a little weird to get used to this. One thing that you can kind of remember is the arrows always point towards the word cout. You're printing things out, so you want the arrow to point towards cout. Okay. And so here's a working program.